The Great Labor Day Hurricane of 2019, Hurricane Dorian, is over Abaco Island with 185 mile per hour winds. I'm Mike Naso with this evening update on our catastrophic Category 5 Hurricane Dorian. Oh, God. Look at that satellite imagery. This is about the worst case scenario for Abaco Island as well as for Grand Bahama Island. You have a slow moving and slowing down Category 5 storm just lumbering right across, and we already saw the devastation, and that was just from the west side of the eye wall. They're about to get the east side where the winds change from the other direction. Of course, the northern edge of the island obviously has been getting pounded nonstop, as well as the southern edge here, and it's a pretty big island, and that eye of the hurricane right within that eye wall is where those devastating winds will hit. Obviously, where this green line I just drew is, that is Grand Bahama Island, and that is up next, Freeport in the Bahamas. You are under the gun from a serious hurricane, one of the strongest hurricanes we've seen in about a century for you. We do now have a hurricane warning from Jupiter Inlet, Florida, to the Volusia-Brevard County line, and a hurricane watch from Volusia-Brevard County line to Flagler and Volusia County line. So hurricane warnings are now up for Florida because the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center brings this dangerous hurricane very, very close to the east coast of Florida. But again, right now, it's Sunday night. This is Tuesday afternoon. It moves very little, and as you can see, it's moving west now at about 5 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, slowing down. Of course, 910 millibars is that pressure, 185 miles an hour, 26.6 north, 77.3 west, and again, that is just about right over Abaco Island, Great Abaco, in the northwest Bahamas. These were the models from earlier. These are the models from now. So you can kind of see before, after. Before, after. Most of them keep the core of this powerful hurricane just offshore the Florida coastline, and many of them keep it offshore of the Carolinas as well. However, some do bring it ashore. We have the H-Wharf model, which has it making landfall north of Cape Canaveral. We have the HMON model, which has it coming in near Cape Canaveral. So if you're in areas of that coastline under those hurricane warnings, batten down the hatches because things are going to get worse before they get better as the winds continue to draw towards the coast. Again, the good news is moving at 5 miles an hour, not 15. Otherwise, we would very likely see a landfall. But it's going to be so close that if you're on the east coast of Florida, you just don't want to risk it at all. Obviously, it's still a compact Category 5 hurricane force winds right over Abaco Island right now. Oh, goodness gracious. Look at this visible satellite imagery. You don't have to be an amateur meteorologist, a professional meteorologist, an atmospheric person. You could look at this as an average Joe and understand what a powerful hurricane we have. Look at the sun hitting the right eye wall. And by the way, an Air Force plane just left Keesler about an hour or so ago. We'll have Air Force recon flying in the plane from 7 p.m. all the way through into the wee hours of tomorrow morning. They'll be zigzagging all around. In fact, there were some reports that people in Abaco Island heard an airplane. And I believe that could have been one of the hurricane hunters in the distance as they were trying to determine how strong it was and what the atmosphere was like. Again, you can see just a catastrophic hit there on Abaco Island has happened, and it's happening right now, and this is going to be a very long duration event because it was moving at 7, then 6, now 5, it'll slow to 4, 3, 2, and it could even stall, and so it'll weaken. I mean, too much interaction with land, maybe it'll upwell cooler waters, but the bottom line is that it's so catastrophic right now that it's just going to be a fierce battering. And by the way, if the eye does dissipate and a new eye wall forms, it might weaken the winds, but it'll expand the wind field, which is worse news for an impact on Florida. Speaking of Florida, this is the long-range Miami radar out of NBC6 in Miami, and that is about the most terrifying eye I've ever seen of any hurricane. Certainly since I've been doing these video updates in the last 14 years. You can see very, very heavy weather now moving into Grand Bahama Island, Freeport right there. The hurricane obviously slowing down. It went over Marsh Harbor, and now areas that were hit before and devastated are getting that fierce right eye wall. So this is about as terrifying a scenario for the northern Bahamas as they will ever see. We did have a Category 5 hurricane back in 32, which kind of looped around here near the Bahamas and missed the East Coast. This might be a little anomalous to this hurricane. There's Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, Port St. Lucie, Vero Beach to the north. So you guys are under that hurricane warning now up on the central Florida coast, because this is expected to make a very close approach over the next 2 days. There's another look at the long-range Miami radar out of the National Weather Service, and you can see we could have an eye wall replacement cycle that'll happen, but again, if it gets a donut eye, that'll just expand that wind field for when it gets close to Florida. As of right now, a tight, catastrophic 185-mile-an-hour hurricane. So where does Dorian rank with Atlantic hurricanes? Now, these are the most intense landfalling barometric pressures in hurricanes in the entire Atlantic basin. Now, we only have records that go back to 1851. That's not a long time for weather. I mean, we have records of volcanoes that erupted, 1,000 years ago. We only have records on hurricanes going back to the Civil War. So, obviously, there have been more on this list before this time of 1851, but on record, Dorian now ranks tied with a hurricane that hit Cuba in 1924 at 910 millibars, and you can see other storms. Labor Day 1935, that was the most intense anywhere in the Atlantic. It hit the Florida Keys, and then of course we had Camille in Mississippi, Gilbert in the Yucatan back in 88, Dean, we covered that here on IPR back in 2007, hit the Yucatan. And then, of course, we have Janet in 55 on that list. That we actually lost a Hurricane Hunter aircraft back in 1955 with that storm. Irma, another Cuban hurricane in 32, and Michael in Florida last year. So, we have storms like this in the 20s and in the 30s and in the 60s and the 80s and the 50s. So these happen, and when they do, you want to be ready for them. Dan Lindsay on Twitter posted this video of this visible satellite. Look at how these areas of Abaco Island just get pounded. Pounded. Dorian has slowed. It has not stopped pounding this island. And again, look at that 3D type of stadium effect with the eye and the little mesoscale features inside the eye. This is as bad as a hurricane gets. As I said before, it's in the upper echelon of hurricanes, and it is over land. It's not out at sea, and that's why it's so destructive. I'm Mike Naso from the IPR 365 YouTube video update page, and we will continue to monitor disastrous Hurricane Dorian, a record-breaking Category 5 on September 1st, 2019, headed towards Grand Bahama Island, currently over Abaco Island. Florida East Coast hurricane warnings are up. Everybody needs to be on alert as Dorian will make a close approach. You can see the flow here from the jet stream that's going to break down the ridging, but how close Dorian gets is still, believe it or not, an unknown. I'll talk to you later.